Hello again, welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Development section of the Emergence Program. Today's topic, although it doesn't sound that sexy, it's actually something that has the opportunity to completely change your lifestyle, make you, boom, level up in life in general. It's something that is a constant dragon that I'm fighting. Even yesterday I was having a discussion with one of my friends and trying to, it made me think about a couple things about how I was going to rein in my financial discipline again. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Financial discipline, getting it to where you're, on the path to financial freedom. What is that specifically, and how are we going to conquer that? I think, for me, the best way of looking at this and kind of make it a little bit more sexy is one of my books that I recommend to a lot of business owners. It's called How to Double Your Profits in 30 Days or Less. And what you think, you're like, oh, cool, double your profits. This sounds awesome. And actually, if you get into it, most of what it is actually cutting costs and doing things like charging people if they have 60-day policies, trying to make it 30 days and how to negotiate pricing and stuff like that, as opposed to actually growing your business and thinking that it's from the income, that's how you're going to grow your business. And this is something, if you follow any of my other stuff on my weightauthors.com site, I talk about this a little bit in one video for like 2 or 3 minutes. But here, we're going in depth, long-term, awesome stuff here. Excited? You should be, even though it sounds boring. So why do I think this is important, and why is this something that, as I was going through the notes of what I was going to talk about, it kind of fleshed out into this long thing. I was like, wow, could be a lot longer discussion if I wanted it to be. And for me, it was directly related to how I was raised, my upbringing, and everyone has the social conditioning side of things, especially as living here in America, the whole consumerist culture of people advertising to you and making you feel insecure and low self-esteem unless you have the product and you're wearing the cool shirt or something like that. So you do definitely are indoctrinated from an early age that materialism and materialistic things should make you happy, they make you higher value and feel cooler. And it's something I still battle to this day. I look out on the street and I see, actually, if you can see that building, I'm like, I want to be in that building. It's cooler than my building. And I'd feel cooler and happier if I was in that one. And yes, sure, there are amenities that are different there. But a lot of that, one of the first things that I had to do, and this was something I did in my early 20s, was all of a sudden I noticed the connection that I had between the emotions and me purchasing something. So I was like, okay, I'm about to buy this. Whoa. And I was very impulsive in my purchases. If I look back again early on in my life, or like what my family was like, I know my family is very similar. Where I had my dad, he all of a sudden bought this boat. And he was, a week before, he was saying how he didn't have any new contracts coming in with his business. But he said, oh, I got this really good deal on this boat, and it was a one-time offer. And it's like, yeah, of course, scarcity techniques and sales theory and marketing advice, you can always hit those little triggers, and it gets you into that. So there's a couple things that I did, and some of these I mentioned before, that really helps me out. The first one is one that I got from Eben Pagan, what he talks about in Wake Up Productive. And what he talks about in there, Wake Up Productive, actually it's called Self-Made Wealth is another one of his products. So it was in that book, or in that DVD product, basically. And what he says is the way to do it is to get rid of the emotional purchasing aspect of an impulse buy, is to increase the amount of time between when you buy something and how much it costs. So if it's something that's, let's say, $50, I think 50 divided by 10, 5 days, we'll say. So if it's $100, wait 10 days before you actually buy it. So you see it, and then you go and you say, okay, I'll look online, maybe it's cheaper on Amazon, and maybe read some reviews, see if this is something that I actually really want. And that's a great way to kind of make those decisions. And then what you do is you kind of extrapolate that out the next. So if it's $300, you should probably wait about 3 weeks. $500, 5 weeks. Into the thousands range, where something costs $2,000, that should be something that you should think about, probably for at least 2 months. And yes, that isn't a perfect scale, I understand that. But the more you can get to the point where that's what's going to take the emotions out of it, and it's going to be a much more rational decision. And actually, if you end up deciding to get it, it actually does give you that nice emotional kind of buzz. I think it raises your self-esteem a bit because you know you've made a conscious decision. And because you put it off for so long, it's that foreplay. And you're feeling out, you're like, oh, I really want this, and then you finally get it, and you're excited. One thing for me, in my living room, I don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV for 6 months. And I finally think I'm going to pull the trigger pretty soon. And once I get that TV, I'm going to sit there, and I don't even watch TV, hence why I haven't needed one for 6 months. But I'm going to be so stoked and excited, like, whoa, I got a TV, this is awesome. And that came from me, like I said, not procrastinating, but protracting it out, and making sure pro-con analysis that this is definitely the right decision for me. And what happens, something I got from a different guru or something. His name is T. Harv Eker. He talks about the wealth thermometer. And what the wealth thermometer is for him, what he says is basically no matter what income level you're at, you still feel about the same level of financial freedom or financial, you save about the same amount, and then you end up at the end of your expenses, you end up with the same amount in your bank, no matter how much you make. And I think most people, what they think is they're thinking, okay, I'm going to make more and more money because, I need these certain things in my life and I don't have them. So if I make more, then I'll get them. And I'll feel more secure and more stable and less stressed. But actually what happens is you make more money, and then all of a sudden, the example I always use is the doctor who all of a sudden has to buy the country club membership. And instead of buying his khakis at J. Crew, he gets his khakis from Brooks Brothers. Not that I buy khakis, I don't own any khakis. So he just all of a sudden escalates the expenses he has and buys more expensive crap that he wouldn't have even known about earlier on if he wasn't making that sort of money, and he wouldn't have even cared about. So I think something that really, one is knowing what that wealth thermometer is. I think that's a more important aspect of it. Two is start catching yourself when you're thinking, because I notice for me is the more financial success I get, all of a sudden I feel things getting a little leaky. And I think, oh, should I go, to Chipotle over there on the street? Or there is the restaurant right here, this really nice steak restaurant. Do I really need a steak? Yeah, it's healthy, but of course, so is Chipotle. You don't need to eat out every night, especially if you're by yourself. There's a time to do that. Like I said, I love actually eating out with my friends and the experiential aspect of being in the present moment and everything. But I want to make sure that I kind of have that decision is much more, it's less impulsive, just thinking, oh, let's go out tonight. And something that I did a lot in the past, forgot about for a while, and I'm starting to get into again, is tracking my expenses to where I look at my own personal life. Basically, I look at it almost as a business. So, most businesses that are successful, they have to the T what their expenses are, where their monthly budget is, and how much income is coming in as well, and seeing where those play out, and they make the decisions based off of that. For me, I used to have a very, it was kind of gray. I was thinking, it seems like I have about the same amount in my bank account every month, and, I'm spending things fairly cheaply. I'm not splurging too much on some shirt or a pair of sunglasses or something like that. But I'll just kind of keep it right there. And the vagueness there, the lack of clarity, any sort of goal you have, any sort of thing you're trying to achieve, if you don't have true clarity there, how are you gonna grow? How are you gonna know you're growing? And how are you gonna measure that and think, okay, what's the next step? And how can I get there most effectively and efficiently? So I think it's really important, first things, is to track your expenses. And I used to do it, this was pre-smartphone almost, maybe it was just the very beginning of iPhones, is I'd write it down either on a notepad or I'd write it on my computer or on my phone. Now I think they have apps and all sorts of stuff where it can kind of put it in different categories and everything. And what I'll do is when I was traveling, I'd have it based on each city. So I'd say, oh, I was in Croatia this week. How much money did I spend there? Oh, I was in Paris this week. Wow, it's more expensive. And then all of a sudden I look at the two and say, well, where did I spend money that I could spend differently? And how could I play that out? I know a lot of people that I meet through RSD and through my own stuff and the lifestyle development stuff is travel is a huge thing that everyone wants to do. Why not? Travel the world. See different cultures, especially with the pickup, go around, meet some beautiful women all around the world. It's fun. I've done it for a while. I love it. And a big aspect of that, obviously, is how are you going to afford a trip like that? How are you going to pay for it? So going back and looking at the last few years for me, traveling around Europe, doing basically the whole world now, and seeing how much things cost, expenses. Currently, if you're watching this in 2013, I think the right around expenses range, when I've tracked my expenses in Europe and stuff like that, I think you can get away with like $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month, and be able to afford the travel, afford your lodging, afford food and alcohol even pretty cheaply if you're on that budget. There's gonna be a lot of hostels in there and that sort of stuff. But when you know that's like pretty awesome to think $3,000 to sustain that is not that hard, or save that up kind of to do a month pilgrimage, and just imagine the amount of the value you can get from going out, approaching girls in different countries and seeing them, stuff like that. But even in a home base here, like me in Chicago here, I don't think my expenses are more than $3,500 or $4,000 a month. Going up further, I think to feel really healthy and be able to stay in hotels and stuff like that. And healthy, I meant healthy like stress-free healthy, but also being able to eat more normal food instead of McDonald's and Burger King, stuff like that. I think that's more going to be in about the $6,000 range or so. So when that's something to, I guess, to shoot for, I talked about in previous videos about entrepreneurialism or, excelling in your career. I think that's kind of the benchmark to have just a really nice lifestyle when you're traveling around. But again, a lot of this comes back to is cutting back on your expenses. So things that I would do, one, actually a big one for me being from the Midwest, Wisconsin, was alcohol. Alcohol is just such a huge expense. And I love seeing so many guys that are in the pickup world kind of shun alcohol in a way to be like, no, I'm not doing it. Tyler doesn't do it, stuff like that. For me, I've definitely had a hybrid there where I've stopped it completely at times. Now I drink a bit. And my goal with that, actually, it's like a two-sided benefit. Because on the one, well, it's multiple. One, health. It saves your health if you're not drinking a lot. Two, you save a bunch of money by not doing it that way. And three, your game is actually better if you work at it and get comfortable not using or relying on alcohol to approach. So alcohol, that for me, that's a huge thing to cut out. Another one is food. So there's a lot of ways to eat super healthy, even when you're traveling on the road. You have Subway. You can go to Subway and get the salads there, which is kind of level one. And then level two, you'd have like Chipotle. Get the salads there. You can eat paleo there and eat healthy there. And then a lot of it just go to Whole Foods. And we've even had it where if you talk to them nicely, you can get a steak at Whole Foods and they'll cook it up on the grill for you, stuff like that. And it's awesome what you can get. So think about that. Other things with it's just the minimalist lifestyle, I guess I'd say. And thinking about what you really need. And I think this also takes a lot of stress off too. Where what you should do, and this will just be an action item here to do on this video, is go into your closet, look at your clothes, look at what else you have in your storage, and think, okay, have I used this in the last year? Have I used this in the last 2 or 3 years? If no, get rid of it. Just get rid of at least half of everything that you haven't used in the last 2 or 3 years. And what'll happen is you'll realize the mental clarity you gain. Also, if you can sell some of it, you'll have some more cash. And you'll start reinforcing in your head that I don't need all this stuff. It was actually, for me, ended up being somewhat of a luxury. The fact that being on the road, living out of a suitcase, I just couldn't buy shit. So I had basically whatever was in there, and that was it. If I wanted to buy a new shirt, I'd have to get rid of an old shirt to get a new one. So the decisions I had to make when I was purchasing things, that really fine-tuned a lot of things for me where I'm just like, yeah, cool. And I was excited because I didn't buy a lot of crap, which is nice. Even things like jeans, and I think if I would say fashion is another area where people spend way too much money. And I know everyone that's watching this, if you're going out, picking up shit, you're going out to clubs and you want to look nice. I think for me, it's like I had 2 or 3 dress shirts and those were actually pretty nice. And then I have 1 pair of jeans, the jeans I'm wearing right now, the jeans I've worn in every video for probably the last 6 months, and I've never even washed them because supposedly you're not supposed to wash them. And I remember for a couple of years, I had a second pair of jeans in my luggage, and I'm like, wow, I've never even used these. So why do I even have them with me? So I just got rid of them, and now really all I have is just the 1 pair of jeans. And that is a good staple. You gotta get a nice pair of jeans. Spend a good $150, $200 on your jeans. I don't think I've done a fashion video. I should do a fashion video or something. Not that I have that good at fashion. And then whatever, you have a couple dress shirts, and then for me, I just wear t-shirts. $20 t-shirts from Urban Outfitter and stuff like that. So you can keep that fairly low. We talked about the alcohol, keeping that low. We talked about the food. Those are the main ones there. I think another big one for me that was an issue that I noticed a lot of people that are better financially, let's say, is their ability to negotiate and feeling comfortable negotiating pricing. One thing for me, I got a coaching package with one of my personal trainers, and he was saying how, oh yeah, normally what we do, we have a 6-month package or a year package. And I didn't want to be locked in that long, and I think that's important as well, is try to take the minimum contract you can if the price is the same. Because the longer you get locked in, the more likely you are to, let's say, get an apartment and then you want to go travel Europe and you're stuck in that lease or something like that. So I think it is really important to get the small term stuff, but also trying to get some sort of discount. So he had a discount at 6 months, otherwise it was month to month. And there was no 3-month package, but I just asked and said, hey, do you have a 3-month package? And he said, sure, we can do it. We'll just do half of the discount. And it worked out great. Whereas in my head, though, what I was thinking the whole time was, oh my God, I don't want to ask this. It might create a little social friction here. Should I really do this? And I think that's the big problem that I have, and I think a lot of guys that are kind of coming from the more introverted background, which many of you guys are, is they don't want to create that social friction. So another example would be you're on the airplane and just saying to the stewardess, saying to her, say, hey, do you have any first class seats available? There's been plenty of times where I see those seats open, and I even probably have enough frequent flyer status where she'd be like, oh, cool, yeah, you're a frequent flyer, yeah, go up there. But in my head, I'm thinking, I don't want her to be like, no, like, why are you so presumptuous? You think you can just go up there? And the likelihood of that happening is pretty much 0% chance. But because in my head, I'm worried about that little social friction, I don't take it. So for me, something that's been a huge thing in the last year or two is that self-assertion that I've talked about before with the Nathaniel Branden 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, being more self-assertive. And for me, this is with my money too. Another example that I had is taxis. So you think if you're in cities, you're using taxis all the time. And the taxi driver, just you kind of assume what I did was like round up, add $1. So $6.25, round up to 7, give another $1, $8. And if you just gave the $7, 75-cent tip, a lot of times he'd look at you and say, hey, where's my tip? I don't get a tip here. And because of that fear that I had of him kind of freaking out on me, I didn't end up tipping based on whatever. And so something my friend told me that I thought was kind of interesting is that most taxi drivers make between like 60 and 80 grand a year or something like that. And I'm thinking at the time when I was told this, is like, that's how much I'm making. And he's asking for these tips. Do you go into the local pharmacy and your bill is $12.35 and she asks, how much do you want back? It's like, no, she gives you whatever the change is back. So just because all since the taxi, they assume differently. So that kind of, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, okay. And that factored in to me not feeling guilty about not tipping whatever. I always tip, but I was tipping probably more than I should have just because I was afraid of the reaction they would give me. And I'm like, well, just like I'm not going to go approach a girl and be afraid to do that because I'm afraid of the reaction, I shouldn't be afraid over here. So for me, it was like a social pressure exercise. So I thought that was kind of interesting, something to play with. But with everything there, it's like, there's just so many ways that these little tweaks you can make to where your money especially and being important there. And guys have asked me before on the blog and on forums and stuff, because I've said I was anti-philanthropy. And I say that in a very shocking way. It mostly comes from me being Ayn Rand, kind of in the cult of the Ayn Rand followers, I guess I'd say, with the whole like extreme capitalism, libertarianism. And yes, I do agree there's a spectrum there. It's not black or white. But what I said and the way I explain my anti-philanthropy is, let's say I'm walking down the street and there's a beggar there and he's asking for like $1, let's say. What I would say is, yes, you could give him $1, and the next day he'd probably be back there on the street again asking for another $1. It doesn't really teach him anything, but it sustains him for a bit. On the other end, I could take that $1, go to McDonald's or somewhere and buy a coffee for $1. That's why I said McDonald's, or save it for a couple times when that happens. $5, all of a sudden I have that coffee now. And now I'm more excited and motivated and have more caffeine in me to have this video be better and have it reach more people and have it be more engaging so you're not falling asleep, hopefully. And what that does is the value that is amplified through me, instead of giving this little value right here, all of a sudden through my own process and who I am and the things I do in life, I infinitely create much more value and amplify it this way. Some other areas that really helped me out with the whole financial freedom, losing the stress there, and issues that I had, another big one for me was living a year ahead. And if I think back to when I was in college, I remember I was always living off of student loans and everything, and assuming I was going to go to medical school and become a doctor, the rationale I always had was, oh, look at this fish tank. I'd like to buy it. Well, I'm going to be $300,000 in debt, but luckily coming out of that, I'm going to be a doctor, so whatever, let's get this now. And I'm living like 8 years ahead, basically. And then when I was going to be an RC instructor, I remember it was kind of happening. I was in training, and I was thinking, well, there's this awesome steakhouse that I want to go to eat this dinner, and I'm going to have a job and be making all this cash soon, so I can buy this now on my credit card. Swoop. And I was always living a year ahead. And that was right about when the whole 2008 economic collapse happened, when basically everyone in America at least was doing that, probably pretty much worldwide. And so that's something that I think a lot of people have reined in, but it's something to always reaffirm, like, hey, cut that out, start saving, balance the budget, get in the black, and then save before you buy something, save before you purchase. With that said, there is the other side of it. You have, let's say, the debt, getting out of debt. Well, other thing with debt too is just like get it as fast as possible. Something that Dave Ramsey, a kind of a financial guy, I remember when that was an issue for me. What he was talking about is tackle the lowest debt thing you have. So let's say you have 4 credit cards. One is like $500. Even if it's the highest percentage, pay that one off first, and then whatever you're paying there directly tied in to the minimum balances you're paying on all the other ones. And all of a sudden, the snowball of momentum starts rolling, and you start feeling more self-esteem and stuff because you're paying things off faster and faster. So I think that's definitely a good way to tackle the debt. But then on the other side, you have investment. And I think for myself, I've done stuff in the stock market. I've invested in businesses and those sort of things. But the best investment I've ever had is investing in myself. So I think, you here being on the immersion program is a big part of that. You're investing in yourself, trying to make yourself better, doing the pickup related stuff, the self-development stuff. Keep on that path, keep doing that. Some of the best things the most expensive things I've ever spent money on, and the best things have always been like seminars, DVD courses, boot camps, all those sort of things, paying to go and be by certain mentors and paying for advice there, coaching. I've done folk coaching. I've done it all, literally tens of thousands of dollars of stuff. And that is what's made me who I am today, to be able to create the leverage and create the impact and give the value that I'm able to give that is ultimately going to create more income and make you live a better life, as well as how you feel. Because it's right, the external things that you get is only so much of it. And what it does definitely come down to beyond that is how you perceive that and how you feel fulfilled and everything that goes along with that, and the self-esteem and all that stuff. So I think, yes, of course, especially if you already have experience in the kind of financial side of things, I'm not here to give you financial advice, but I think the thing that I can control the most is myself and who I am. So that's the direction I'm going to go when I'm looking to kind of spend my money. I think too, it's always a good indicator, and I've talked about this in a video on YouTube before, is realizing that money is time, time is money. So I think I talked about this somewhere before in one of these videos, and how a lot of people, they kind of create a disconnect there, and they think, oh, well, I can't, I'm just going to throw this money at the lottery or something like that. It's like, what is that? It's like there's no sort of mental involvement going on there at all. They're thinking, well, I have these specific numbers. It's like, I don't play the lottery. I don't play any of that stuff. I don't sit there at the slot machine because there's nothing going on there. But I will pay for that book, read that book, and be able to make better decisions and stuff like that. So to tie all this up, getting into identity, who you are, and everything, before we get into the book is, well, actually, whatever. We'll get into the book. The book that I want to tell you about this month is called The Millionaire Next Door, and it's by, what's his name? Thomas Stanley is the name of the guy. And this was one of the books where I learned about a lot of this sort of stuff, and where he talks about is how most of the millionaires that you have, at least in America, are not the guys driving the Lamborghini, stuff like that. Those are the guys that probably lose that Lamborghini in about a month or two because it's a depreciating asset, and they lose $50,000 having to resell it because they couldn't afford it in the first place. And most of the millionaires are the ones that drive an old car and have the same clothes they had 10 years ago and invest in like real estate and really boring things, as opposed to the whole like sexy stock and investing in Facebook or some random crap like that. And so I definitely think it's a great book to check out to kind of rein in your expenses and get you thinking much more pragmatically about where you're spending money. And what I want to leave with that is those sort of people, you think, well, that's not cool. And it's funny because you have the whole, with the pickup stuff, we always talk about like looks, money, they don't matter. And hell yeah, they do not matter at all. But it is, for me, what it comes down to mostly is the self-esteem sort of stuff, and be able to push myself there and see how much I can kind of accomplish, and being competitive with myself, whether that be girls or financial sort of stuff or business stuff. And I remember hearing this really early in my pickup career, where they said, if you really want to boost your self-esteem, go out, pull a girl home, and then when you pull her home, like, you don't even tell anyone about it. And then in your head, you're just thinking, the whole time you're thinking about, yeah, I hooked up with this girl and I didn't even need to tell anyone. I didn't need to prove it to anyone. And I think it's the same thing with finances and financial success. The people that I am most drawn to, or the people I respect the most, is some of the most successful people I know. And them still, when I go into their bathroom, they have like the huge discount soap machine. And because they're like, well, why would I spend all that money on soap? I don't need to have really nice soap, even though I'm like a multimillionaire or something like that. Or they drive a used car instead of going off and buying some Lamborghini or something like that. And I just really respect that, because that is, again, an indicator of the whole not giving a fuck what people think. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm not identifying myself with either anyone else's opinion or definitely anything external, which definitely relates to all this. Not being tied to that materialism, superficiality, and just going out and letting your self-esteem exude through you and being the man. Hopefully that helps you out. Love this topic. It's fun. Definitely leave a comment below if you have any comments, criticisms, anything like that. And I'll see you next week in the webinar.